Seasoned Chef Troy Vincent here. Today we're going to be making something called short ribs Espagnole, which is a brown sauce. It's one of the 5 mother sauces of French cuisine. One, if you had not ever heard of, you may learn about today. Okay, so what I have here, I'm going to go through the ingredients, is 2 cups of beef broth. Sorry, I have diced celery, flour about 1/3 of a cup. I have wine, again, Worcestershire sauce, salt and pepper back here. I have bay leaves, which I'll use like 2 in the pot when I get it on later. I have rosemary, which again I was going to use fresh, but long story. About 3 pounds of short ribs, which I usually try to go through and cut up any excess fat. There was a little bit on some of these, and actually there's a little bit more than I wanted, but that's the whole rib. And when you get to the other side, there was no fat, so it kind of thins out as it goes to the other side. But these are probably some of the better I've seen recently. We have about 1 cup of carrots, and usually I use, like again on these, yellow onion. I do have some, but I had this purple onion already cut up, so I went ahead and used it. And here is again the celery. It's like two stalks diced up. And the 2 things you're going to also need is a skillet. I put 3 tablespoons of vegetable oil already in the bottom of this, and a crock pot, or a corning dish. You know what I'm talking about, not a crock pot. Anyway, a Corningware casserole dish. And if you want, you can turn your oven on, but you're going to be a little while doing this, so there's really no point in turning it on yet. First, we have to brown the short ribs in a little bit of oil, and I'm going to render as much fat off of those as I can, because that's really the base of Espagnole. Is supposed to be it's a beef or whatever animal fat you're using to make Espagnole, which generally I use beef because I like the beef anyway. The short ribs Espagnole, which I learned from a guy years ago. He never thought I figured out what he was doing, but I finally figured it out, because some days I would come in and he was making French onion soup, and I couldn't tell if he was making the French onion soup or the short ribs, and I wouldn't know until I seen him put them in. And anyway, the short ribs were really awesome. So that's when I kind of learned this recipe, and he didn't ever really teach me his recipe. I kind of over time learned my own version of it, and it's almost exactly the same. So I said Worcestershire, I think I said already, in the flour. Yeah, I got everything here. So let me set up my camera, and then we'll start on browning the short ribs. Okay, first thing we're going to do is we're going to kick the heat on about medium. Now I went ahead and took the liberty of taking the ribs and each short rib and giving it a light coating of salt and pepper to start with. So we'll let this warm up a minute, and then we'll start up again. Okay, now that it's warmed up a little bit, I'll go ahead and place the short ribs in, and I'll put them fat side down first. At least as fatty a side you can find on there. I mean, if it doesn't have like really fat on one side, you can set it on any side at that point. It doesn't really matter. Some people would say set it the bone side down. There's a bone right here, but it's going to be in the oven. This is not a 5-minute dish, by the way. This takes several hours to make, unfortunately, but in the end you'll find that it's worth it, because once we brown these, we put them in the casserole dish. We'll make an Espagnole sauce in this pan and deglaze the pan and pour that over the ribs. Put them in the oven for a long period of time, usually about 3-4 hours at least. So this is not just a 5-minute recipe. This will take quite a while, and all that Espagnole soaks into the ribs in the oven, and you'll see what I mean when if you ever make it and you try it yourself. It is so worth it. And I'll let these go for a few minutes and we'll come back and check them. One thing is I kind of like to caramelize the outside of the ribs because it gives it a lot of extra flavor, and that's one thing, even with the Espagnole, once you cook it in there, it makes everything so much better when you kind of do this way. And then again, once this gets done, I'll move them over to the casserole dish and I'll make the Espagnole sauce, which is basically you're doing like what they call a mirepoix, which is your aromatics. It's carrots, onions, celery, and you let them glaze in the pan. Well, first you put a little wine in here, deglaze, and then you put all that in here and then let it go. Now some people strain out the carrots and the onions and the celery and just put the sauce in there. I like to mince it down real small and I keep some of it. I don't use it all, but I kind of strain some of it off, and so that the flavor of the carrots and the onions and the celery is all through. Once you put it into the Espagnole sauce, and then you can put the rest of it in the pot with in the casserole dish, corningware. And once I start doing that, and then the vegetables start to get done, then I add the flour and sort of make like a roux, and then I thin it out with the beef broth and a little bit more wine if I need. Put a little Worcestershire sauce in there, get it all nice and glazy. Then I'll strain some of the vegetables and then we'll go into the pot with it. One more thing, when you're browning these, you're not cooking them well done. These are beef ribs anyway, just again to make sure you understood that. You can brown them. I like to flip them around and get a little browning on every side. I don't like, you don't have to. I think it adds a lot more flavor to the beef when you brown them on all the sides. So I try to brown as much as I can on every side, and before I put them in the casserole dish. And again, if you make this the right way, this is not an instant thing. It'll take you several hours to make this. And one of the things I like to also serve it with is I like to make mashed potatoes. I may make a video about my mashed potatoes, because really everyone who has my mashed potatoes loves them. They're just your traditional Southern style mashed potatoes. And the way I do it, I've seen people make potatoes, they overcook them, they're not really fluffy like fluffy mashed potatoes. So a lot is in how you cook them and how long you cook them, and that's one of the important things. So these are about ready to go into the casserole dish, and then I'll get some wine in this pan, and I'll start deglazing, and then I'll add my vegetables. And I got a little, just in case they stuck a little, I got a little spatula here. And this pan is again, I'm not advertising for Wolfgang Puck. It's a Wolfgang Puck skillet, and I've had it for quite a while. I use it. I love it for certain things, but things do stick to it, and worse than probably any other pan I have. So I think we're about done on this end. Let's see, let's put the stove if we can and give it a minute on there, and then we're gonna move these all into the dish. All right, I'm removing these and putting them in the corningware dish now. I'm going to turn the heat down just a wee bit. That's really good and hot. I don't want it to splatter on me when I start pouring wine in there. But here, I'll give you a quick shot of the casserole dish here in a second. Now you can see here I've placed that's the short ribs in the casserole dish, in the corningware, sorry. And once I get the sauce done, I'll pour it over. I put the bone side down on this so that the sauce gets really, I really like the sauce to, you know, penetrate the tops and everything. I want to make sure it gets done all the way through, so I always put the bone side down, and it absorbs the most heat from the bottom. So there you go. Okay. I'm going to use just a little bit, not a lot to start. Most of that came right off. You see that? Right off the bottom. So it's in the oil now. Whatever oil is left in the fat from the beef. And then I'll start adding onions. And then this will also sort of glaze on the bottom of the pan, these vegetables. And then you'll want to deglaze the bottom of the pan again with more wine. You can see the beef is just about gone off the bottom of the pan anyway. And we'll let these simmer. And once these start turning a little clear, we'll come back and I'll add the beef to the beef broth, and then more wine, more beef, and then the beef broth, and then a little Worcestershire sauce. And the flour first, actually, sorry, the flour goes first. One thing too, you'll want to kind of keep stirring this, because you don't want your vegetables to burn on one side. You want to kind of keep stirring them around, then spread them back out. They definitely cook faster when you do that. Plus, you want them to kind of, I hope I don't have too much oil in here, because it looks like I'm not going to have anything sticking to the pan to deglaze, but we'll continue without it either way and do it the same way we normally would. If it hadn't had deglaze, we had got some sticking to the pan, but usually when the sugars cook out of the celery and the onion and the carrots, you get like a burnt coating on the bottom of the pan that you can deglaze with wine or beef broth or whatever. Okay, so at first it wouldn't stick, but then it started to stick, and I started to get my coating on the pan. I added a little bit of the flour, and then I decided, you know what, it's not really going to be roux if I don't get the flour into the fat, which is what's surrounding the vegetables right now and keeping them from sticking in the first place. So I went ahead and got the flour into the fat, and then I'm going to go ahead and start deglazing the pan. I'm going to put some more wine, and we'll start deglazing this pan, and then we're going to see it's going to start thickening up on me. So then I'll go ahead with the oops, I don't want to lose any of that broth, and we'll get this where it's set up a little bit, and then we're going to strain it at the final moment. I'll put some salt and pepper in my beef broth too, because I like it to taste good, so I'm always kind of messing with things. We'll let that get hot, and then we'll, now at this point is when you want to add any more salt and pepper in you want to put in, but I'd taste it a little bit first, but I'd start letting it get thick. Make sure you get that pan deglaze, because you got salt and pepper probably stuck in that as well from the ribs when I salt and peppered those, and whatever got into the vegetables. And of course the sugars from the vegetables it's almost gone now. So, and see, it's not like it's like a gravy. It's not. Once you cook it for hours in the ribs, it's gonna thicken up anyway, regardless. So, so now the pan is actually completely deglazed. Maybe a little bit over here still. You can see this is the bottom of the pan is silver. We're going to add a little shot of Worcestershire sauce in there. And we're going to go ahead and add our 2 bay leaves. Which actually, we will also add another bay leaf or 2 to the casserole dish, because this is the rosemary. Again, I usually use fresh. This is kind of one of those aggravating things. I don't know what I got a bad batch of herbs or something, because I had more that fresh. It didn't hold up very well, and I was like shocked. But just put a couple bay leaves in there because you want them to simmer in the gravy for a little bit. If it really gets to the point, sorry about that, that's my little remote. If it gets towards too thick, you can always thin it out with a little bit of water. I wouldn't get too happy. But one thing I'll tell you, a lot of people don't like with the 5 mother sauces. You have bechamel, you have velouté, you have Espagnole, which that's what this is. It's a brown sauce. And then you have hollandaise and tomato. So there's your 5 mother sauces of French cuisine. And I'll tell you one thing, that when you're making a bechamel as compared to a velouté is basically the same thing as a bechamel, except you're starting off with an animal fat. And then you maybe add like a chicken broth or a whatever you're making. If you're doing chicken and you're gonna use some chicken fat, and then so I've seen people use duck fat or whatever, and then use chicken broth. If you start off with beef fat and then you add beef broth, I've even seen pork fat and pork broth. So you can actually do that, believe it or not. Get pork. You can make your own pork broth. They sell in some places. You can buy a pork base, and I think this is a wee bit. I'm going to add a wee bit more wine to mine. Of course, all the alcohol cooks out anyway. And unfortunately, I told y'all I was moving, and I packed my chinois, which is what they call a china cap, which is what I usually strain this through to get the vegetables out. And you can actually, there's a wooden peg that goes in it. Now, the wooden peg is here, which I'll show you that, but I don't have my chinois, which a lot of old women used to have them. And you go inside of a cone and you roll it around, and you that's how they used to make tomato sauce and everything. They call it a china cap. It's this pointy cone with holes in it, so you can use it to make tomato sauce, and that's what I usually use. I'm going to have a trick doing this today because I do not have my chinois here. So I'm sitting here debating on how I'm going to do this without my chinois, which I had packed up. As I told you, I'm moving, so it's not here. And I'm like, oh, what am I going to do? This smells so good right now. You would have to be here to understand. And you can smell that little bit of wine. You can smell the pepper, the salt. You can smell a tiny bit of rosemary. And once it cooks in those ribs, it adopts a lot more of the beef flavor as well from the ribs. Oh, it's phenomenal. Now I'm going to turn off the camera for a minute, and I'm going to go figure out how I'm going to strain this and get the vegetables out of it and just run the juice. Okay, and as you can see, I managed to get most of the vegetables out, and what I did was I used this because I don't have my chinois here. I used this basket strainer for your deep fryer, and I got out 90% of them. And then what I didn't get out, I went ahead and blended in with my immersion blender, my the motorboat, whatever you want to call it. I'm going to add a touch more wine to this. Just a touch. I'm going to add 2 more bay leaves. Oh boy. Turn the oven on since I forgot. And oh, you may want to lower your rack in your oven if your casserole dish takes up a lot of room. Where's my spoon? There it is. And I'll stir this in. And then I'll go ahead and put this over top of the short ribs in the casserole dish, and I'll put it in the oven, and I'll bake it for about 3 to 4 hours. I will test them from time to time. If they're done in 3 hours, I will take them out in 3 hours. It just depends on the tenderness, because I always do it by how tender they are, because I cook them till they're really tender. And they literally almost, you know, just, with this sauce and some mashed potatoes and well, this is the gravy, so you don't really need to make gravy. You got mashed potatoes and Espagnole with short ribs. So I'll go ahead and do that. Pick up this pan. Bring the short ribs up here for you to see. And then I'll go ahead and get all this out of here. Make sure I go back and roll them all around, make sure they all get a coating of it so nothing gets missed. Now some chefs might yell at me for doing Espagnole like this, but you know, I don't have my chinois, and I like to do things in a way that works for me. As long as you're basically following, you know, like the ingredients or whatever, and you do it kind of like that, and you're but I think I finished saying what I was saying earlier. A bechamel is always butter, flour, and cream. And when you're making a bechamel and you melt the butter, then you add the flour, you don't want to brown the flour, so you want to keep it all at a low temperature. Let me see if I can just scoop some up and put it over top of each one. You don't want to brown the flour. For bechamel, it's supposed to be like a really white sauce. And then when you're making something like Mornay is just bechamel, and you add like Gruyere cheese and wine to it. See? And Mornay sauce, I don't know if you've ever heard of a hot brown. It's where they take toast and turkey, and I actually have those posted on my Facebook page for the Seasoned Chef, where I've made. They actually pulled one of my pictures down because they thought it was something bad. It was actually the toast and the bacon. There's toast, bacon, turkey, tomatoes, and then you pour the Mornay sauce over it, not bechamel, because once you put the sauce in it, or the wine and the cheese, it becomes Mornay. You pour that over top, and I guess it looked like something bad to them. They thought it was something bad, and they pulled it. But then I said, "Hey, wait a minute!" And then they said, "Oh, we're sorry." They put it back up. I was like, "Are you kidding me?" So they gotta watch how they censor things, because I think sometimes they're not really paying attention to what they're censoring. They just think it's something, and then they do it, and they don't really. Maybe they just don't know what they're looking at. I don't know. It was very obvious. It's posted on my Seasoned Chef Facebook page. You can go there and look at yourself through the stages of making a hot brown. And I don't really like all this up on the side, so that's it. Now you'll put this in the oven, and you'll cook it for at 350 for, like I said, 3 to 4 hours. I'll come back when I put it in the oven. Let me lower my rack in my oven, and then I'll come back and I'm not going to make you wait here for 3 hours, so I'll come back when it's done and we'll check them out. I just got done checking my short ribs. They're just about done, and I went ahead and started the mashed potatoes on, so they're going to be done here soon, and I'm going to get a vegetable and we'll have a 4-course meal. I drained the grease off of the all the beef fat that cooked off of the short ribs, and then I added a little bit of water back into, because it reduced the brown sauce down to just about nothing. So if you want to see the short ribs, there they are. And here's what's left of the brown sauce after I added some water to it. to thin it back down a little bit, but not before I dumped off all the fat, because you don't want all that fat mixed back in with the brown sauce. Okay, I brought a camera, or my knife. Camera. I have the camera. Anyway, I brought a knife in here to show you something. I really don't even need it. You know, people think of beef ribs. I mean, this is so tender. You don't even need the knife at all. It's so tender. Hold on, if I could do this with two hands. I'm trying to hold the phone in, and let me switch hands and grab. Let me try it this way here. I don't know if that's gonna work at all. Well, you get the idea. Look, see how easy it pulled off. I mean, you can pull the meat right off. I'm sorry. I'm trying to do this with two hands. You can see it pulls right off. You don't even need the knife. Here, let me set the knife down where I was. My fork fell on the floor when I was trying to shuffle the camera around and get rid of the knife. But there it is. And I'll tell you, hold on one second. Wow, that is so good. You just wouldn't believe it unless you tried it. I put a little bit of the Espagnole over top of my mashed potatoes. And a little bit of broccoli and cheese, some dinner rolls. Anyway, that's it. That's it for the season, chef. Hangout. I also posted a video after this of me making the mashed potatoes, so have a good evening.